Hello and good day, everyone. I'm Erica Nicole Evablino, a grade 11 STEM Copernicus student. I am going to discuss to you the 21st century literature from the Philippines and the world, specifically the American regime. Now let's travel back to the American regime in the Philippines, as I will present and discuss it right now. American regime in 1898 to 1946. There has been a significant change and developments in education and culture. Free public instruction, knowledge and information become more widely available to Filipinos due to free public education. College education allowed those who took advantage of it to rise in social standing and join the large group of educated people who eventually joined the middle class in the nation. English as a medium of instruction. The adoption of English as the primary language of teaching exposed Filipinos to Anglo-American ways of thinking, feeling, and living that would become ingrained or embedded in the nation's educated class mentality, as well as the literature they produced. This educated class would serve as the foundation for a thriving English language, Philippine literature. Filipino wrote different literature like news, reporting, poetry, stories, plays, essays, and novels. Filipino writers went to all forms of literature. Their writings clearly depicted their love of country and their longings for independence. As students of Philippine literature, we need to understand how Philippine literature in English developed and improved from its early years during the American period and beyond. To begin with, let us take a look at the three periods, namely, period of reorientation, period of imitation, period of self-discovery and growth. Now, let's discuss the period of reorientation, which happens in 1898 to 1910. English as a literary medium emerged during the American occupation in 1898, a choice influenced by history. English as a literary vehicle came with the American occupation in August 13, 1898, and as they say, a choice bestowed as by history. The period of reorientation spanned the American period, including the Philippine-American War, and included the establishment of public schools in pacified areas using English as early as 1900. During this period, writers adjusted to newfound freedom after Spanish regime repression, adjusting to democracy, English language, and literary style standards. They learned direct expression, sentence constructions, and discarded sentimentality for a more precise English language. Despite this, literary output was produced, indicating a decline in literary value. Next, let's move on to the period of imitation, which happens in 1910 to 1924. This period was characterized by the Filipino writers imitating the American and English writers. The UP College Folio, the school publication of the University of the Philippines, published literary compositions in English written by pioneers in English poetry, essays, and short stories. And lastly, the self-discovery and growth, which happens to 1925 to 1941. In this period, Filipino writers acquired mastery of the English language. Evidently, they began to write confidently and competently. They wrote in free verse, sonnets, odes, elegies, and others. They even started to write novels and dramas. Now let's move on to some of the Filipino writers during the American regime. First Filipino writers during American regime is Maximo Magayat, Kala, in 1891 to 1955. He attended the University of the Philippines and the Philippine Normal School, where he was appointed editor of Colegio Folio, the first school paper in UP. Also, his works are Usapin ng mga Pilipino in 1915 and the development of Philippine politics in 1926 and The Filipino Rebel, a romance of the American occupation of the Philippines in 1931. Since we finished discussing the newspaper or publication during American regime, now let us know the parts of newspaper. Parts of newspaper. The first is general news. Typically, this is the most significant international and local news. Usually, the paper's first page has them. The news article title, known as the banner headline, is printed in large, bold characters. Second is the local and foreign news section. It is consists of news from nationwide as well as global towns and cities. The third one is the editorial page. This section contains editorials which express the opinions of the editor or publisher on specific issues or events. The fourth is the sports page. In this section covers sports news from both local and international events featuring well-known sports figures. The fifth one is the business and finance section. This resource provides information on banking, foreign exchange rates, imports, exports, and prints of prime commodities, businessmen, and interested individuals. And the sixth is the classified ads section. The advertisement section includes various categories such as help, wanted, for less or for sale, and wanted to buy. And the seventh is the entertainment section. It provides information about television, radio, cinema, and other entertainment-related activities. And number 8 is the home and culture section. It gives information about cooking, home renovation, budgeting, and other topics. And the number 9 is the society page. It includes information on notable figures who are commemorating significant occasions in a specific location. And the number 10 is the weather section. And the number 11 is the travel and tourism section. It features a travel guide that points travelers in the direction of picturesque locations and provides details on local activities. And lastly, number 12, the announcement and obituary page. The document provides information on various religious activities, list recent deceased individuals, and their burial times and locations. Another writer during American period is Faustino S. Aguilar during 1882 to 1955. He was among the first Filipino novelists to examine and depict social realism in his works. Pinaglahuan was Faustino's response against imperialism and colonialism. Now let's move on to kinds of novels during American regime. First we have allegory. Allegories including fables, parables, and apologetics are fictional stories that use symbols to convey meanings that are not explicitly stated, requiring interpretation. Next one we have comedy. The term comedy originally referred to amusing or entertaining plays, but now it encompasses any writing with these objectives in mind. Next we have epistolary. An epistolary novel is a novel told through the medium of letters written by one or more of the characters. Next, we have feminism. Feminism advocates for political, economic, and social equality for women, stemming from Western traditions that limited rights. It is rooted in organized activities for women's rights and interests. Next, we have Gothic. Gothic literature features dark, picturesque scenery, melodramatic narratives, and atmosphere of exotism, mystery, and fear, often set in old houses with dangerous characters. Next, we have magic realism. It's a narrative style that is primarily utilized in Latin America. It entails adding legendary or magical elements to tales that ostensibly deal with real-world events. Next, we have realism, or literary realism is an era where authors depict everyday life without embellishment or fantastical plots, focusing on ordinary people and situations rather than flowery language or exotic settings. Next, we have the romance. Romance is a literary genre featuring mysterious, adventurous, or spiritual stories, often involving bravery and strong values, and can also address relationship problems in modern times. And next, we have the picaresque. A novel is an early first-person narrative that follows a rogue or low-born adventurer or picaro as they navigate various social and geographical environments to survive. And next, we have the satire. It's a kind of art, mostly literary and theatrical, in which persons or groups, vices, follies, misdeeds, or other flaws are made fun of through parody, caricature, burlesque, irony, mockery, or other techniques, sometimes with the intention of persuading the subject to change. And last, and science fiction. Sci-fi or science fiction is a genre that blends imaginative content with scientific facts, theories, and principles, distinguishing it from fantasy in settings, characters, themes, and plot lines. Now let's move on to another writer of Filipino during American regime is Paz Marquez Benitez during 1894 to 1983. She is a Filipino short story writer, educator, and editor, played a significant role in advancing women's professionalism careers and Philippine literature development. She wrote the first short tale in the Filipino language to be published in the English language in the newspaper, Dead Stars, in 1925. Benitez was a member of the first Filipino generation to be educated in the American system, which utilized English as the medium of instruction. Now let's move on to the elements of short story. First, we have a character. A character is a person or an animal who plays a significant role in a short story or other literary work. Next, we have the setting. A story setting refers to the time and place where it takes place, often described through landscapes, buildings, seasons, or weather. Next, we have a plot. Plot is a series of events that are brought about by the interactions between the characters. The sequence of actions and events that characters take up leading to the primary conflict is known as the plot of a story. We have the 5 components make up a plot. First is exposition. The tale's beginning or introduction. The reader needs to be aware of this background information in order to comprehend the story. The setting and characters are introduced at this point. Next, we have the rising action. The part of the story after the characters and setting are introduced and where the events of the story begin to create suspense as the character faces conflict. Next, we have climax. The story's most thrilling section. The story's pivotal moments occurs when the narrative shifts and moves closer to its resolution. Next, we have the falling action. Everything that occurs after the climax but before the story concludes, including the immediate response to the climax. And lastly, we have the resolution. At the end of the story, loose ends are tied off. There may not be definitive answer. This is known as a cliffhanger ending. Next, we have theme. The theme is the central argument the author aims to convey to the reader, encompassing an idea, belief, moral, lesson, or insight. Lastly, we have the point of view. First-person writing involves the main character telling the story using words like I, me, or we. It's commonly used in narratives and autobiographies. Second-person writing involves the narrator speaking to the reader, used in business writing, technical writing, song lyrics, speeches, and advertising. Third person writing, often used in academic writing and fiction, involves an external narrator using words like he, she, it, or they. Now let's move on to the other Filipino writer during American regime, Zoilo Galang, in 1895 to 1959. Who was a Filipino writer from Pampanga. He is credited as one of the pioneering Filipino writers who worked with the English language. He took special ed courses at the University of the Philippines in 1925 before continuing his literary education at Columbia University. He is the author of the first Philippine novel written in English language, A Child of Sorrow, published in 1921. Now let's move on to form of poetry. First, we have a monostitch. A monostitch or one-line stanza can also be a whole poem. Next, we have the couplet, a stanza with two rhyming lines. Next, we have the tercet. An ABA rhyming pattern is a stanza with three lines that rhyme, while a terza rima is a poem consisting of tercets and ending with a couplet. Next, we have quatrain, a four-line stanza featuring rhymes in the second and fourth lines. And next one, we have quintain, a stanza with five lines. And next we have the sestet, a stanza with six lines. Next we have the septet, a seven-line stanza. It's sometimes referred to as a rhyme royal. And lastly we have the octave. A stanza with eight lines is written in an iambic pentameter with more lines, resulting in more varied rhyme and meter patterns. And another writer from American regime is Amaro Vera Hernandez in 1903 to 1970. He was a Filipino writer and labor leader who was known for his criticism of a social injustice in the Philippines and was later imprisoned for his involvement in the communist movement. He was the central figure in a historic lawsuit that required 13 years to resolve. He refined his literary technique while working a reporter, writer, and editor for a number of newspapers and journals. Next, we have another writer, Manuel Arguela, during 1911 to 1944. An Ilocano writer in English, patriot, and martyr. He is known for his widely anthologized short story, How My Brother Leon Brought Home a Wife. The main story in the collection How My Brother Leon Brought Home a Wife and Other Short Stories, which won him first prize in the Commonwealth Literary Contest in 1940. He also graduated from the University of the Philippines first class in 1912 with a Bachelor of Arts degree. Another writer is Juan Cabreros Laya in 1911 to 1952. His Native Soil, an English novel, won him a Commonwealth Prize. Also, he was involved in textbook publication in the 1950s and founded Inang Lupa Publishing. In addition, he penned numerous books and stories about his own nation. Next, we have another writer is Wilfredo Ma Guerrero during 1911 to 1995. From 1941 till 1947, he was the director of a Filipino Players, also a Filipino playwriter, director, teacher, and theater artist. He wrote over 100 plays, 41 of which have been published. Also, his published and unpublished plays have either been broadcast on the radio or staged in various parts of the Philippines. And that's all. Thank you for watching.